Let's talk to our next guest, president of the National Right to Work Committee. He is Mark Mix. Mark, welcome back to the show. How are you, man?
I'm doing fine, Vic. I know you sound a little congested there.
I got the COVID, Mark.
Okay. You're doing all right, though, otherwise.
Yeah, I'm no doctor, but I think I got the Omicron, which is not as severe. I am talking to you from my home because I did test positive, so I don't want to go in and infect my coworkers. So I'm sitting in my living room and, talking to some cool people like you. So let's talk a little bit about, I was intrigued by the opening paragraph in the little thing that Ken gives me that says, is Joe Biden so bad at handling the economy that he can't even create cushy union jobs for his fat cat big labor friends? So, Mark, when he was on the campaign, this was one of the phrases, one of those empty phrases that he gave, good paying union jobs, right? That's all he said, good paying union jobs. And then the first day, literally the first day, he gets rid of thousands of good-paying union jobs when he cut down and shut down the XL pipeline.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The dichotomy there is not lost on you, Vic, that's for sure. And I'm sure it's not lost on those rank-and-file workers that went from their union officials sending money to the Biden campaign, endorsing the Biden campaign, and then basically 1 week into the administration, they're on the unemployment line. I mean, that is a really amazing story and one that doesn't get told enough. And then if you think just the Keystone Pipeline, and then we've got another dispute up in Michigan on pipeline number 5, and we've got a ban on exploration on federal lands and federal leases. And so there's a whole bunch of energy employees out there, rank and file workers, I might add, union workers, good union jobs that are looking for work today because of the policies of this administration.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up about the union leaders donating to Democratic candidates. It wasn't just Joe Biden. It was, that's been a pattern for years and years. And when I first heard about right to work, Mark, that was the first issue that I heard about, that if you're a union member and you pay your dues, you should have a say in where the union leaders send your money.
Yeah, we believe that too, Vic. In fact, we believe it so much that we ended up at the United States Supreme Court in a case in 1988 called Beck versus Communication Workers of America, where a union employee by the name of Harry Beck had that same problem. Unfortunately, his money was being taken and given for ideological causes and candidates which he did not support. And he made that clear, and it's probably the most compelling topical argument of the compulsory unionism power that unions have, the ability to force you to pay them for the right to work. And of course, Missouri is not a right to work state. 27 states have laws where you're protected in that regard. But Vic, you make a good point, because what you have to do in order to exercise that right to free yourself from the political conformity of forced unionism is you have to give up union membership, which means you can't vote on a union contract, you can't vote in union elections, you can't go in and run for office in the union, you can't try to hold the unions accountable. And Lord knows in St. Louis we heard lots of stories about Gary Jones and District 5 and the UAW and the corruption and now the building trades down there. I mean, if you're a rank and file member in St. Louis, you want to hold union officials accountable, and the only way to do that is to withhold your money, whether it be for political or for internal union corruption that's exposing itself.
Now, I think you're an expert on the answer for my next question, that unions have drastically changed from when they were adopted back in the day when people didn't have to work 15 hours a day for, no money. It's turned into something much different and much more corrupt throughout the decades and decades, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, originally back in the turn of the late 1800s, early 1900s, when you had the AFL and you had Samuel Gompers and you had the guilds, the Cigar Wrappers Guild and the Window Glazers Guilds and the Hat Maker Guilds, I mean, they were voluntary organizations that you joined because they could improve and amplify your voice and power in the workplace. Then in the 1930s, well, actually 1926 in the railway industry, they went to Congress. And get this, Vic, I mean, this is a classic story. It repeats itself over and over and over again. People go to government for additional privilege, and that's what the unions got in the 1920, 1926 with the Railway Labor Act, 1935 with the Wagner Act, now called the National Labor Relations Act, and now you have the government with their thumb on the scale giving union officials extraordinary power to force workers to pay them a fee for working in the United States. That's a federal law. That's the law that is imposed on Missouri right now. The only way to get out of that is to pass a right to work law, which 27 states have done. That says, look, you have the right to join a union. It's protected by federal statute. It's protected by state statute in most instances, but you can't say to someone, you lose your job if you don't support political causes or ideological causes, or you disagree with the union and what they're doing, either on the shop floor or probably more relevant in the political world, where they're big players.
If you're at a place of work, right? Let's take a place like a factory or something like that, where a lot of people work. Looking at the current atmosphere of the United States, half of those people are for unions and half of them are not, right? I mean, so half of them are Democrats, half of them are Republicans. What else can we possibly think, right?
Yeah, well, look, only about 6% of the private sector workforce is represented by unions in the country right now. So 94% of workers in the private sector have decided, for whatever reason, and union officials will tell you it's because the law doesn't allow people to unionize. That's just malarkey. It's not true.
Right.
I mean, federal statutes protect your right to organize. So what that means is workers are making decisions about what the union offers. And one of the points, back to your original point, Vic, and your kind of awareness of this issue, was the political nature of the unions. And let's look no farther than the teachers union right now. I mean, you've got a union official, Brandy Weingarten, who lives in New York City. I mean, she doesn't have any kids. She's never had kids in school. And yet she's dictating policy for education in our government school system across the country. And she's got radical views. And teachers and parents are looking at it. And it's happening now in Chicago. It's happening in Northern Virginia, where I live, in Loudoun County, where you've seen a dramatic pushback because the power of these union officials has been exposed. And it runs counter to what rank and file workers want. That's the truth.
Exactly right. All right, one more thing on history, and then we'll get up to date for what's happening now. But how much did Jimmy Hoffa? What part did Jimmy Hoffa play in how powerful the unions got?
Well, I think if you look back at the Teamsters Union and kind of their methods, you understand that when you can't convince someone through reason or through logic, that the last vestige of a scoundrel is violence and intimidation and corruption. And that's kind of the legacy of the Teamsters Union. And I hate to say that, because there are so many rank and file workers who are doing their job and were promised pensions and promised good wages and protected. But yet the union officials, look no farther than the United Auto Workers Union, and this gets to St. Louis. I mean, Gary Jones is now in federal prison for racketeering and extortion and stealing money from rank and file workers. He was in charge of District 5, which was St. Louis, and I think 17 states of the UAW. I mean, these people, because they have the power of compulsion and force, they lose sight of what their mission is. And unfortunately, rank and file workers across the country are suffer from that when these guys go to Palm Springs for 6 months out of the year and buy golf clubs and $400 bottles of champagne and 50,000 watches that end up in a warehouse in Detroit. I mean, and get kickbacks on all that stuff. I mean, that's why voluntarism and that's why voluntary unionism is a policy that works, because it allows workers to hold union officials accountable. And so when you have this corruption, I mean, I think it was Senator McClellan back in the Landrum-Griffin hearings of 1959. He said compulsion and corruption go hand in hand. And that's when Jimmy Hoffa was in front of the Klieg-lights in the Senate committee rooms talking about it and battling with the Kennedy brothers. If you remember your history on that, Vic, it's kind of interesting to go back and look at that, because it was about union corruption and it was about organized crime control of unions. So those were big issues then, and unfortunately the corruption issue is still a big issue today.
And Hoffa played with pension money with organized crime all the time. Right, enough history. So Joe Biden gets on TV and tells us how great the economy is doing, when the number of jobs that were added in December was half of what is expected. So how does he go on television, Mark? And by the way, we're talking to Mark Mix, president of the Right to Work Committee. How does he dare go on television and tell us how great he's doing with piss poor numbers like that?
Yeah, Vic, I'm going to put that question back on you. If you can explain it, I'd let you do it. But yeah, right. I mean, basically what's happened is a lot of workers have given up on trying to find jobs. I mean, apparently, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are about 11 million jobs that are open today and can't be filled. And frankly, I'm sure it's the same in St. Louis and the surrounding suburbs in Missouri, that basically everywhere you go, you see we're hiring, signing bonus, great pay, whatever. You see these small businesses looking for people to work. And I think part of it is kind of slowing down now, but when you incentivize people to stay home, when you pay them to stay home, that has dramatic impacts. And so the 3.9% number that he talks about in December it's really just spin, because there are still jobs that are open and jobs that can't be filled, and that's putting pressure on wages, which puts pressure on costs, which raises inflation, and those are other issues and bigger topics. Mick, I'm sure you can tackle them, but I'll let you do that.
I'm no expert on anything at all except Italian food. That's it.
There you go.
But It's just, we've been talking about COVID a lot this morning because it just came out that, oh, wait a minute, 76% of people who died from COVID had 4 or more comorbidities. Well, that's not what you said at the beginning. And I'm not bringing that up for you and I to talk about COVID, Mark, but it's the same kind of situation where Biden talks about the job numbers, and I'm like, jackass, you missed by half.
Yeah, and the productivity numbers are way down, and the inflation numbers are way up, and so while it looks like they're marketing this as the workers have all this power to increase wages. Well, all of that just spins into an inflation that keeps the cost of living increases, and wages, frankly, aren't keeping up no matter what Joe Biden and his handlers say or what the teleprompter says. I mean, it's just not reality, and most people know that now. I think, Vic, I hope anyway, and there's a certain percentage that just tend to believe it, and everything is great. But if you talk to most people and get out into the country, you see that it's not true.
And it's, even people that voted for Biden are watching inflation go up faster than wages are going up, which means every day you're losing money. I mean, even if you voted for him, you got to say, oh my God, what did I do?
Yeah, and I think there's some of that buyer's remorse, and that happens with everybody. I mean, it happens with the past president, it happens with the presidents going back, it happens with your state legislature and your governor and all that good stuff. There's buyer's remorse, but in this case, the impact is real, and we're seeing it. And notwithstanding press conferences and reading off teleprompters, I mean, the reality is that 3.9% unemployment just doesn't make any sense, and then missing your job targets by half, by 50%, is not anything that leads to, quote, the most robust economy in history, or whatever they're calling it.
Right. Mark Mix, president of the Right to Work Committee. It's always great talking to you, Mark. Let's do it again when I feel a little better, okay?
Thanks, Vic. I hope you get better soon. Take care of yourself.
Thank you, baby. Appreciate it.